Doing mewing. Clearly, one of the drivers for people coming to this channel and understanding what I'm doing is people who want to gain improvements. Now, I want to be clear, I want to help you gain health improvements, and I understand that health and beauty are, in this scenario, fairly synonymous. So it is largely the same thing. I think the best elements, at the moment in mewing are the mealtime exercise, the tongue chewing, and the abs walk. It's very important to understand that, like mathematics or learning a language, there are many different textbooks, there are many different programs, there are many different approaches. Everyone learns differently. So this is a very difficult thing to understand. Remember, I know where my tongue is when I'm thinking about it. We don't really know for certain where anyone else's tongue is. All the real research on this has been done in laboratories in sort of test situations. They're not really normal every day. You're not sitting in front of a computer. You're not sitting at home in front of the television. You're not driving a car. These are the things you do most of the time. And people haven't really analysed tongue position in these situations. So a lot of this is educated guesses. So it is not easy finding science or helping people to change, teaching people under these conditions. Now, there's a lot of other myofunctional therapy or oral myology, training programs out to do that. And don't forget how important general body posture is. I think a lot of people will make us gain orally within their mouth. Then they need to make a gain with their head and neck posture, then they need to further gains in the mouth, and it sort of can vary backwards and forwards. That, where are you stuck at for your next movement forward, your next general improvement. So I just talked briefly about the top recommended exercises at the moment. The mealtime exercise is a good one because it's a function that is you can fairly easily intercept. So you're going to eat something, you sit down at your dinner table, you chop your food up, then I say people should have a talisman. I go into the exercise a little bit more, and we will be producing more on the mealtime exercise. It's something I need more up there. I've got some videos I've taken that I'm putting together. But if you take a talisman, take an object on the table and then put it behind with your non-dominant hand, or I often just take my non-dominant hand and slip it down in my belt behind my trousers. Now that hand's out of action. It's out of action, and because I'm right-handed, so I've got my left hand, my non-dominant hand, it's out of action all this time when you're going to be eating. So that's reminding you to do a different pattern of behavior. You've got to chew your food till it's absolute mush. I remember my grandmother, I think, telling me that you needed to chew 32 times because you had 32 teeth. Well, I don't know about the scientific validity of that statement, but certainly we need to be chewing more than I often see some kids. It's 1-2 chews and the food's into your mouth. And I do worry a little bit about lots of people telling me that they've got diet issues, and I'm asking them, well, did you chew your food properly? Particularly if we're talking about carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are supposed to be mixed with salivary amylase in your mouth. So that needs enough time to mix and enough chewing to mix, and of course enough saliva to mix, which means a decent bit of chewing. So I think before you head down a low carb diet, although I am on one, do try chewing your food well. So if we're using the mealtime exercise, it's something you can actively do. Once you've chewed your food into liquid, you really chin tuck. Yep. Remember the film A Dead Poet Society? They're making the kids quote poetry while they're doing penalty shootouts. Why? Because it made it more difficult. If you can knock out penalty goals in football while you're quoting poetry, you're going to know your poetry. You're going to have that poetry well embedded in your mind. If you can do a decent swallow with a real good Mackenzie chin tuck, with really good body posture, then you are forcing good swallowing patterns. You're making it more difficult for yourself. And if you're doing that repeatedly, really try and relax those shoulders. Feel the core muscles, feel the tongue coming up. Feel that back third of the tongue as you go to swallow. And I'll come back to engaging the posterior third of the tongue. Remember, engaging the posterior third of the tongue with a suck hold. You've got to really understand that. You've got to feel it. You've got to feel your hyoid coming up. Now, the next good exercise also is tongue chewing. A number of followers have set off on this gargantuan chewing marathon and, of course, ended up with jaw joint problems. And if you look at the lecture, I'll put it underneath, where I look at Jude Law, I'm talking about the inner U, this section, which is mainly from the tongue effect, and the outer U here, which is more from the muscle effect. And I want people really to be working more on the inner U. For most people, that's where they have a deficiency. And so for most people, that's where you've got to do the most work. And of course, I think a lot of TMD is this imbalance, a part of TMD, temporomandibular dysfunction, jaw joint problems, is this imbalance between the muscle and the tongue effect. Is not everything. But I worry about people just focusing on just tough chewing gum. Tough chewing gum can be very valuable, but be careful, and be careful often because of your jaw joints. If you're going to tongue chew, you make so much more of the tongue effect that it's unlikely that you're going to precipitate a jaw joint problem. And also, you're getting the direct force of the tongue right up onto the palate, and expanding, having an effect directly on the maxilla. That's where you want it. You want the effect directly on the maxilla. So tongue chewing is a very effective way of doing that. And I've got several videos about tongue chewing. So go and have a look at those videos.